The big three are now sharing their quarterly and yearly earnings with investors, and we'll take a brief look at Intel's absolutely catastrophic performance and the close to a terrible year for the company. What does this bloodbath of a report mean for investors? How will it impact PC enthusiasts? And when will the company go back to high profits and high margins? Let's dive in, but first, a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Urcdkeys.com. If you buy a retail Windows 10 key, you could spend $100 or more. But if you buy an OEM key from Urcdkeys.com, a Windows 10 Pro key will cost you only $15 when you use the coupon code C25. The keys work globally, and you can even get a free upgrade from Microsoft to Windows 11 if you wish. After you've made your purchase, you will find your key in your purchased orders in the Urcdkeys website. Click on Get Keys and copy the key. Then in Windows, click on Start and type Activate, and then on Activation Settings. Then click Change Product Key, pasting the key you just purchased, and click Next. That's it. Your copy of Windows is now activated. If you want Office 2021 Professional, you can use the same C25 discount code and get it for just $60. Urcdkeys is also having a spring sale with some cool, affordable mechanical keyboards, gaming mice, and even chairs. A big thanks to Urcdkeys.com for sponsoring today's video. Check the links in the video description to get your cheap OEM Windows keys today. Looking at Intel's results in detail, we see a drop in revenue of 32% from the same quarter last year, so that's from $20.5 billion in Q4 of 2021 to $14 billion in Q4 2022. So that puts Intel in the red when it comes to net income, with a loss of $661 million for last quarter. That's from $4.6 billion in Q4 2021 to negative $661 million last quarter. If you think that's catastrophic, the reason it's not even worse is due to some accounting gymnastics. There was a 170 bps improvement to gross margins coming from insurance, so the gross margin was actually more like 37% for Q4 and not the 39.2% claimed by Intel. More egregious is the change to improve life of equipment depreciation from 5 to 8 years. Intel's reasoning is that IDM 2.0, so the new foundry business being open to third parties, will prolong the life of the fab equipment. This is dubious at best. Without this change in accounting, Intel's margins would look more like in the mid 20%, and that's what I expect to be the real number going forward. That's staggering. Intel's margins effectively halved in 1 year. This is probably Intel's worst quarter in its history. Some have speculated that China reopening post-pandemic in the coming quarters will restore PC sales, but I'm doubtful of that. I think spending in China will be very conservative. I mean, what exactly does Intel have to offer that would entice high-margin sales? If you're not aware, the channel has an overabundance of PC inventory, even more so than smartphones. People are not buying PCs or PC components. More worrying is this absolutely delusional PC TAM expectation. Intel has no compelling high-margin products. In my own testing, the 13900K is basically the same as a 12900K if you tune the latter properly, and the same is true across the stack. And when it comes to volume, the vast majority of consumers use PCs for basic tasks like email, creating PowerPoint presentations, or spreadsheets and web browsing. With the rise of cheap SSDs and with AMD having very affordable APUs, most consumers can have their machines last 8 to 10 years now with a small initial investment. The main reason people upgrade laptops nowadays is when the battery stops recharging. It's not for extra performance. Then there are the cheapo ARM devices that basically can address most users' needs that require a PC, especially in emerging markets. Intel's projection would imply a 6-year cycle for PC users, but with mounting pressure from AMD and soon Nvidia perhaps entering the CPU business, there's no way that Intel can move anywhere near the 270 million units they are projecting projecting, let alone 295 million. If you're wondering why Microsoft is ending Windows 10 support soon, then you can see how desperate the industry is. Microsoft is hoping that forcing Windows users to Windows 11 will lead to higher PC sales, especially as we're seeing more features locked to new hardware like thread management. But what Microsoft is really doing is driving people away to Linux or Apple, at least on their personal devices. As if things weren't terrible enough, the level of intelligence of Intel's executives leaves much to be desired. What I'm about to read will probably damage your brain, so take a deep breath and accept that you will now lose a decent amount of brain cells. In Intel's recent PC TAM projections, someone asked Intel CCO Christoph Schell how on earth was Intel projecting such wild TAM numbers, to which he replied, "There is huge upside for us in emerging markets. I have myself lived in Asia for many years, Middle East as well. That's the areas where we see growth, and this is where we expect growth to come." And then maybe if I bring all of this a little bit together, a little bit of a personal anecdote, I'll talk about my daughter Maya. She's 20 years, she's in college, a junior in college, and she always had access to PCs, given what I'm doing for a job, for a living. And she never looked at them until the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, she understood that consuming education content on a tablet, consuming it on a mobile phone is really not cool. And so she lobbied me not to buy her one laptop, but two, because she was really concerned about not being able to dial in. So she wanted to have, if one unit went down, she wanted to have two. And that, I think, is a customer segment that was not looking at PCs prior to the pandemic and is now a very core part of what we are planning with. So I hope that gives you a bit more color and explains why we are bullish about the growth. So Intel and its CCO think that there's a 300 million units TAM in emerging markets, and the basis for this completely unfounded projection is that this executive's daughter asked her Intel executive father for two laptops instead of one during the pandemic period. This is the basis for Intel's projection. Intel could look instead at their sales history, the current global economic context, the fact that people currently working in the 20 to 55-year-old range have never had such low incomes or low expendable income considering the rising cost of living, and the fact that there's very little reason to upgrade, but instead Intel is basing their wild estimations for TAM on this executive's daughter asking for two laptops. I can't tell if this is genuine delusion or a desperate attempt to keep Intel's stock from completely collapsing, so let's just accept that brain rot has completely set in at the executive level at Intel. Now, of course, there's always the data center, and while I do believe there's some growth there still, the reality is that not only are hyperscalers and cloud being very conservative with spending, but the untapped markets have never had such compelling offers as they do today from other sources. AMD recently announced their 4th-gen EPYC processors. We'll look in more detail into those in the AMD earnings video, but it's safe to assume these will run laps around Intel's current offerings, and Sapphire Rapids, while being very impressive from a technological standpoint, won't offer the performance or the value to dethrone AMD. The only market I could see wanting Intel Xeons is China, but it's a big question mark what exactly the hyperscalers will be doing there. Homegrown CPUs and GPUs are gaining traction in Asia, so I'm skeptical of Intel's chances in the server markets. Now, could the GPU division rescue Intel in the coming months and years maybe? With Raja being recently demoted and the GPU division divided into accelerators and GPUs, I wonder if Intel will be shifting resources to the data center side of GPUs and leaving the gaming products starved of brainpower, much like their executive team is. It's hard to say what the impact of this will be, but I think if Intel bats hard on data center GPUs at the expense of client GPUs, that only means bad times for us PC enthusiasts. It would be great if Intel could really have an impact on the PC discrete GPU market, seeing as both AMD and Nvidia are happy price fixing us out of upgrading, but unless Battlemage is somehow on time this year and offers performance at least on the level of a 4080, and with high availability, I think Intel's gaming GPUs will eventually get cancelled. On the back of the worst performance in the company's history, a lack of any innovative products to entice both data center and client customers, and a completely delusional board, Intel decided it was a good idea to pay a dividend this quarter. How is that even possible? possible if Intel had a negative 9.4 billion in free cash flow in 2022, you might ask? Well, they are borrowing money to pay the dividend. Intel is borrowing debt to pay out equity to investors instead of focusing on delivering innovative and compelling products to consumers. So let's get this straight. There's no profitability in sight for the coming quarters. There are no compelling products coming. The execution is still a mess with every product segment with delays. Intel's competitors are firing at all cylinders on the back of TSMC with better products and better value. And yet Intel thinks it's a good idea to be borrowing debt to pay a dividend to investors. If I were an investor, and I might soon be because Intel's stock will eventually fall so low that it will be criminal not to buy it, I would be demanding this board gets committed to an asylum. Yes, I know the US government will bail Intel out no matter what happens, but the management of the company at the moment is so irresponsible that if it comes to that, I think the company will never be the same again, and it might come to that. What Intel is doing is unsustainable and extremely damaging. It looks to me like their executives are doing everything they can to cash in before the whole thing collapses. Basically, Intel needs a miracle. Maybe something magical will fall from the sky and change Intel's fortunes. From what I heard, Meteor Lake will be coming later this year, but for laptop only. The tooling at fabs is delayed, and there's no way Intel will have either the volume in laptops or any new desktop CPUs this year. And with Intel's dependency on client, that means this year will be a complete fail for the company. Maybe with China reopening, there's some money to be made there, but that's not solid enough. There will have to be some drastic measures taken, and unfortunately, I suspect the gaming GPU division will be axed to stop the bleed, and the cuts won't stop there. The good news for us is that perhaps this will mean price cuts for desktop parts. Older Lake chips like the 12700K at $300 are already great value options, and the prices might tank even further. If you don't mind staying a generation or two behind, then this could be a good year for PC enthusiasts. I'll be looking at Nvidia and AMD's calls next, so be sure you subscribe so you don't miss that. This video was made possible by my awesome patrons. By supporting my channel on Patreon, you will gain access to the Cortex Discord server, where you can talk to me directly and join a welcoming community of tech enthusiasts. If you can't contribute at this time, then give this video a like and share it, as that really helps. Thanks for watching, and until the next one.